Welcome to Mortgage Momentum. Smart guidance, real stories, better home decisions. We are your hosts. I'm Jarod Temple.
And I'm Danielle Hugunin. Thanks for joining us today. This is your go-to space for strategy, stories, and staying sharp in an ever-shifting market.
Let's jump in and get the momentum rolling. Welcome back, everybody, to Mortgage Momentum. You've aged, Will.
We're different people than we once were. Thanks for having me back.
I feel like I've shaved a few times, but anyways, we're thank you for tuning in for section 2, or portion 2, or episode 2.
Episode 2.
One.
With the one, the only.
Two of two, with Will Ruter.
We're so committed, we wore the same clothes.
That's right.
We planned this.
I haven't slept. But welcome back.
Thanks, Jarod.
Let's dive right back into it.
I live in Kansas City, Missouri, close to, the Plaza area, and I work in Overland Park, and I feel like it's two separate universes. I mean, completely different challenges, completely different. I mean, completely. How do you unify that? I mean, to some extent you can't, but you also have to. Otherwise, you have portions of your community that are, moving out, vacating, then you have crime and all of the things that come with that. And then South Overland Park is at 190th Street now, right? Because we can't go far south enough.
Yeah. So, we talk about housing just in a very 10,000 foot view. Like, housing is good, right?
Right.
But not every housing product works for every housing jurisdiction.
Right.
In the same way that, I'm going to go buy a house. Well, that could be one of a billion different things.
Right.
Are you talking about a condo? Are you talking about, the one side of a twin villa? Are you talking about, an enormous single family home, a smaller single family home? I'm going to buy a house. Okay, that narrows it down very little as to what exactly you're going to go out and buy.
It has a door, maybe.
And it's the same way for communities. You talk about, not only the, detached single family, which has historically been the most homeowner occupied, unit of housing. But, there are townhomes that are for sale or for rent. Those have not kept up with the times. They were built once upon a time, kind of went through a lag, starting to see an uptick in those, which is fantastic. You see the twins, the tris, and the quads starting to come about. Some of those being for sale, some of those being for rent. It's a mix. But what that means is that we are expanding what, this housing product is going to look like, because housing circumstances change for people, but it's not all going to fit everywhere.
Right.
So the counter to NIMBYism, the not in my backyard, isn't necessarily the build anything anywhere. It's still got to fit.
Right.
But we also can't say it's this or that.
Right.
It's got to be an and conversation.
Yep.
And it's got to fit not only physically within the area that you can put it in there, but it's got to fit demographically. It's got to fit culturally. It's got to fit a lot of those things. And I'll tell you, in having represented the home building industry for a little over 6 years now, people are not going to build what they know is not going to sell. They're not building for the fun of it.
Yeah.
They're doing their market research. I think our communities could take a lot of solace in knowing is that, hey, if somebody brings to you a housing idea in your community, there's a pretty good chance they've already done their homework that this is going to work. And if communities can provide a well-lit path to the answer of yes, people are going to innovate with their applications.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's a really hard prospect to tell a builder, a developer, an investor, or anybody that says, hey, we don't know, I'm me, Joe Schmo, community leader. We don't know exactly what we want. Why don't you go put together all of your financing, your architecture, your engineering, secure the land, all of that, and then bring it to us, and we'll tell you if we like it or not. That's a $250,000 proposition before you even start moving a clod of dirt. That's a lottery ticket.
Yeah.
And with the cost of capital these days, that's why a lot of what we're seeing from a housing standpoint is something that's been tried, the kinks were worked out, and then they moved on. So, some of the criticism of the industry is like, well, you just continue to build the same thing over and over and over again. Well, capital is going to flow to something that's going to provide at least a predictable return. Mm-hmm. And part of that calculation is whether or not the community is going to accept something. So if you've got a community to accept this, the chances are great that you're then going to get to accept the next one. that first application for something innovative that people haven't seen before, that's the hardest one to do. And with the cost of capital these days, it's a really hard prospect to get somebody to say, you know what, I really believe in this and I'm willing to put my own personal guarantee on it and risk my own house to go make this happen. It does happen. Sometimes it pays off. Sometimes it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Feels like there's not a lot of control there, but
No.
it's something that needs to happen. And, you know, as bankers and lenders, I think just as with government, we very much get comfortable in doing what we're used to, what we know works, same thing. You know, forward thinking and risk taking is not exactly something that we're all known for. So I think about that a lot.
Calculated risk.
My role as a banker is like, how do I think forward, more forward? How do I defy sort of the stigma and like the, you know, the stereotype of what I do and be the person that can bridge that gap between, you know, whatever that is, banks and movement, forward movement and change. It's overwhelming though, but something I feel really strongly about. So it's really interesting to hear you talk about all of this.
Yeah, I mean, society is made through incremental progress, right? We don't have the housing market we have today because of one decision that was made yesterday. It's an aggregate of decades of, you know, economic factors and decision making, both on the policy side as well as on the actual investment and the industry side. And so, if we really reset expectations that look, the housing circumstances we have today are only going to further erode if we do nothing.
Yep.
But we can start improving them today and make them a little bit better every day so that we do have a more robust, healthy housing market. Because even if people are able to buy and sell homes today, there's not a complete moratorium on that. There's still activity. There's still transaction volume. Things are still happening. So, you know, don't believe the doom and the gloom that, the housing market is stalled or it's a terrible time to buy or a terrible time to sell. Each of those circumstances is going to be different for each individual. What we need to recognize is that even though things are happening, very few people would characterize today's housing market as healthy. It's the lack of inventory. It's the lack of, you know, development in the pipeline. It's the lack of affordability, the most historic drop in affordability that we've seen in modern mortgage history. And so we can make things better. Can we fix it? Depends on what your definition of fix is, right? But we can make it better, and that should be what we're after.
Right.
Yep. You might say this is a mission, and if you've seen Blues Brothers, Elwood said it.
We're on a mission from God.
I'm dating myself. Classic, but I love it.
Jarod.
I think it's necessary to have a mission, and I think and appreciate you and the HBA spearheading this because it's necessary because nobody else has been doing it. So.
No, and Jarod, thank you for saying that. And this is something that no one in the country has done.
Yeah.
I've given a couple of presentations to the National Association of Home Builders. They've seen what we've done here.
Yeah.
They want to replicate this around the country. This is resonating. So they're duplicating our research in other markets.
Mm-hmm. This isn't a Kansas City problem. This is a national problem.
Absolutely. While our you know, particular variables are unique, the overarching lack of housing opportunity that exists is universal. And so what we are is the tip of the spear. We're going out there and trying it because we've got the research and we've got the support from, you know, members like Bell Bank and all of those other awesome members of the Home Builders Association that say, you know what, if we just sit back and wait for this problem to fix itself, we're going to be waiting a long time. Yep. So it's really visionary leadership on the part of our membership that has said, hey, we're going to do something that's never been tried before because we've got a high degree of confidence that it's going to work. So go make it happen. And whatever you do, don't stop talking about it. So luckily, that's really the only gift I was given by God is to talk. And so
you are good. You know your stuff.
Here I am talking about it, and I appreciate people like yourselves giving us a platform to do that.
Of course.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. We need to get you in front of more people. There's probably not enough of you to go around, but you know, you're really making me feel excited and empowered and even more passionate that I do about this. And so we're really excited that we have you leading us in this, you know, direction.
Yeah, it is a genuine honor and a privilege because housing is so important. And I'll tell you what, home ownership is a beautiful thing. And when we look at housing, we've always talked about housing in terms of cost and balance sheets and income statements, and it's a math problem. And we just haven't done a good job as an industry and as a society talking about the emotional aspect
Yes.
of housing. This is like, my wife and I became first-time home buyers in our early 30s, right when we moved to Kansas City. It was the first place we ever owned. And I look in the house and I'm like, oh man, the baseboards are all scuffed up because the boys are crashing, their monster trucks and their footballs all over the house. And, I don't know what that stain on the ceiling is, but I know my youngest probably had something to do with it.
Yeah.
And then I look at all that and I'm just like, what a beautiful mess this is, because this is where my kids are being raised. And
Yeah.
I was like, more people need to come home to this kind of chaos and know, there's nobody I can call about that stain on the ceiling. If it's going to get fixed, it's going to be by me because I own this place. And that's a great problem to have. And we want to introduce that opportunity to much more people than currently have that opportunity.
Yeah.
It's a home.
It is.
It's so good to be reminded of that.
Yep.
It really is.
Okay, let's talk about the future of housing in Kansas City. What do you see happening, and what do you see coming down the road, say 2025 from right now through 2030?
Yeah, our national association, our chief economist, which if your listeners aren't tuned in to what Dr. Robert Dietz puts out on his blog, eyeonhousing.org, you really should. That information is just incredibly valuable. But one of the things that our national economist group talk about is just the demographic improvements that occur from 2025 to 2030 when it comes to when these generational cohorts are going to come into their prime real estate buying years, also corresponding with a perhaps divestment of the single family home by a retiring baby boomer generation. And so the correspondence of those two things are creating a real opportunity in front of us. And while it's an opportunity, misplaying that hand can absolutely have a long-term consequence. And so earlier in the episode, we kind of I dropped a stat about the number of lots that are in development. Well, I think when you look at how communities are developed and those development patterns over time, you see what some of those more mature communities are experiencing with regard to housing. Take Prairie Village, for example. They turned over their entire city council when the prospect of a duplex being allowed on an R1 single family lot was introduced at the local level. I mean, this housing stuff is very impactful in the public discourse. The average new home sales price in Prairie Village is like $1.7 million.
Huge.
It's enormous. And it's because they have nowhere to build. So you've got to remove something that was there in order to make something new. Yep. Otherwise, you're doing a major gut remodel or something like that, which also is, I mean, that's an expensive proposition too. For example, in Kansas City, Missouri, there are 164,000 existing single family structures. And the fact is today we're building right at 400 new houses in Kansas City, Missouri every year. It was 900 prior to the adoption of the energy code, but now they're at 400 new homes a year. And so you start to think, well, what is that percentage of the overall housing stock that is being added to on a yearly basis? It's like 0.4%. Yeah. So our ability to build and develop is going to be different in coming years. So we've got to emphasize infill. We've got to emphasize remodel and rehabilitation to take care of what already exists. And that is part of our conversation with these local jurisdictions with regard to their construction standards. Because when you go in to remodel a home that was built in the 1950s, you're not building it to the 1950s code.
Right.
You're building it to today's code.
Yep. And
do those things conflict with one another?
Yes.
And if absolutely. And especially the prices. And so when you look at, someone, trying to pencil out a remodel or a rehab of an older home in one of these places, if the cost of rehabilitation is too high, there comes a tipping point where they just say and tear it down.
Yeah.
And then that unit of housing is gone forever, and something else that is not going to be even remotely more accessible to a broader portion of the population is going to take its place. Yep. So that's not to bash, infill or tear down rebuild by any means. That's a healthy component of an overall home building market. But I will say that for all of these homes that are coming down, the replacement cost is so high that we've really got to be mindful of, what our policies are that are adopted at the local level, because it will accelerate the elimination of some of this more historic and therefore affordable housing inventory. So, but ours is a metro that's going to continue to grow, and it's not only the our normal having babies and funerals, population growth that we've got in a community, but it's also in migration. And you think of like places where I came from, in those smaller towns, where did the kids and the grandkids wind up? They wound up probably in Kansas City. And ultimately, what's going to be your access to not only, your legacy, your family, being able to go see the kids play soccer or do those things, but also access, the level of healthcare that you need. And rural healthcare delivery isn't what it once was. And so people are coming here. So we're, not only are we experiencing housing needs from our organic population, it's also the in-migration and an imported senior population that is coming to take advantage of this incredible way of life that we've got. So we really do, again, have opportunities in front of us, provided that we start working today to address those, because there's no switch you can flip and turn on a bunch of extra housing. Clearly, otherwise we would have flipped it already, to satisfy that need. And so competition is healthy, but too much competition can break a market. And I think that's what certainly we experienced over the course of the pandemic. And so that demand exists. Is what can we do with our supply to satisfy that demand that also satisfies the ability to pay? And that's why having, great partnerships with financial services and mortgage providers like yourselves that can help people navigate, that particular sequence is such a critical voice within the HBA.
Yeah. So what is one or two policy shifts that could make the biggest or the best impact today? I've asked that question of policymakers. Policymakers have asked that question of me. And it seems like the most consistent response is speed to market. That old adage that time is money is absolutely true. And so, what used to take, 2 days to get a permit now takes 2 weeks, 2 months, sometimes never. Because of all of the different requirements needed to satisfy that. Look, if a housing plan has a signed, stamped, sealed set of plans from a licensed and insured design professional like an engineer or an architect, they've already put their entire net worth and their entire professional credentials on the line that says this is going to perform exactly the way your community requires it to perform. You don't need to put it through the ringer and make some, proprietary changes to it just to say that you made a change to it. That's what we're experiencing in a lot of communities. So if you expedite the speed to market, additional capital will flow to that. And then you're going to get either larger products or more consistent projects. So that's the speed to market is certainly a big one. Let them build.
Yeah, let them build. Let the builders build, and let all of the people associated with the home building industry contribute their expertise in one of those 100 skill sets. Just let them cook, as the kids would say.
Yeah, that's right. You just can't trust politicians.
You sit on a throne of lies.
Okay, that one's really funny.
Well, the thing is our housing, particularly in Kansas City, is at City Hall, like we talked about, and City Council. Those are not full-time legislatures. They have 9 to 5 jobs, and then they're representing their community in the evenings. They can't be expected to be an expert on all things
That's a
housing.
really fair point.
Our housing economy has put them in a really bad spot. That they're expected to know all of this stuff and make informed decisions. And so when a policymaker asks me a question, that's the best part of my day, because they're genuinely curious about how they can make the best decision.
And they can learn.
It's when people who don't ask questions and think they know the answer to something,
Or assume.
or you can't tell them anything because they're a know-it-all that doesn't know a darn thing. That's a dangerous circumstance. So we love questions, because that tells me that there's a genuine curiosity and an honest desire to make a positive change. So there are those examples out there of bad actors in the policymaking space here in the local level.
Sure.
They say one thing, do something completely different, and then gaslight the public that they're doing the right thing. But that's not the universal truth by any means. It's members of the community that raise their hand for whatever reason. They wanted to put their name on a ballot. God bless them, because the communities need that. And they just want to make the right decision for their families and their neighbors. And so we just want to equip them with some housing expertise that they can make the right decision that benefits their community.
I love it. I love it. Let's talk about what gives you hope for the future of housing in Kansas City.
Well, the hope is it is not necessarily unachievable, but the reality is that everybody sleeps somewhere at night. And so the need is never going to go away for housing. And as long as we've still got the tax code that we've got and the economy that we've got that is predicated on equity accumulation and property ownership, home ownership is still going to be something that people desire to pursue. Certainly you're going to have elements of the workforce that are going to choose to be renters, whether it's an apartment or a home. They just cherish that flexibility, don't want the responsibility, and that's perfectly fine. They need a place to sleep too, so we'll build that. But by and large, people want access to something they can eventually own, a pathway to home ownership. And so when you look at stats like, the average age of a first-time home buyer being 38 years old, or the average age of a home buyer in general being 56, that to me generates a level of despair in younger generations that the opportunities of previous generations are not going to be available to them. So my hope is to give hope to those younger generations, that there are people out here fighting for your ability to own something, whether or not you're ready to own it today, but maybe if you're ready to own it in 5 years or 10 years, that someone started fighting for you today to make that unit of housing possible when you're ready.
Yep.
So I'm an eternal optimist. I believe in Kansas City. I believe in the people of Kansas City. It generates good people, honest people, and eventually honest people come to honest conclusions, and that's that we need more housing. We need to let them build.
Love it. Absolutely love it. It's been such a pleasure having you here today. I feel so excited about the future. And hopefully whoever's listening to this also feels the same. And, I want to do my part, and all of us want to do our part to help this initiative and continue to grow.
Yeah, so visit letbuildersbuildkc.com and learn how you can plug in and get engaged and access the tools to fight for your own housing future.
Awesome. That's great. Support local builders, city planners, and lenders working to provide solutions. I love it. Thank you, Will, for joining us. This has been fantastic.
Thanks for the opportunity to be with you.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us on this episode of Mortgage Momentum. We will see you next time. Take care.
Thanks for joining us on Mortgage Momentum. If you got value from today's episode, subscribe, share it with a friend, leave a review, or email us feedback at mortgagemomentum@bell.bank.
We always welcome comments, feedback, and suggestions for future shows. Thanks for joining us, and keep your momentum going. Until next time.